Welcome to the 120th episode of the Supernatural Occurrence Studies podcast.
So damn paranormal.
Ooh, my name is Jason Knight, host of the show, and with me, as always, is
Oscar Spector.
Producer extraordinaire and podcast co-host. Oscar, you had me fooled there for a second. I thought that was really Lexi.
No way, you thought it was Lexi. You thought it was someone else, maybe. I don't know whose voice I was copying.
Mickey Mouse? I wasn't sure.
You know, I do pull off a decent Mickey Mouse sometimes.
You do? So. I've known that about you. Yes.
You knew that about. Okay, good. I don't know if you were in that club there.
I am in the club. What has been happening, my friend, over the last 2 weeks since we released an episode about movies that possibly kill?
Right. I haven't shaved. See this? I know you haven't seen. I know people can't see me, but Jay can see me. And you see all the shadow? I haven't shaved.
Yeah. Quarantine does that to people. I haven't had a haircut since like early March.
Right. No, I did get one. A month ago, a little more, a little less.
Did you really?
I did. Yeah. It was. Yeah. They were completely. I had to keep my mask on the whole time. I didn't have like a shave, obviously, because you can't do that. But I kept my mask on while the haircut was going.
You like to live dangerously. I haven't had a stranger come close to me since early March, and I'm not going to start now. I'm going full 70s, dude. I'm growing out my mop to go full 70s. I can't wait.
I can't wait to hear all the ups and down, the up stories and down stories of everyone's lives after all this passes, because there's going to be, like, I don't know, like 20 years down the line, it's going to be like some ex-heroin addict running for president saying that COVID helped him got him clean because by force his drug dealer wouldn't let him into his crack shack without a fucking mask on. And you couldn't find one. You try to make one. He'll tell the whole story, make a few hearts bleed, and then, win presidency. And then we're going to see like movies and documentaries galore about this.
Yeah. I want to go to a crack shack. That sounds fun.
The crack shack. Every major metropolitan area has one.
A crack shack.
Crack shack, yeah.
Yeah, dude. I'm feathering my sides back like we did in the 80s. And they loved in the 60s and 70s. I could do it already. Just slick that back on the sides.
So
I'm doing it.
For those who have seen Jay, might then wonder why didn't I crack the joke of like, what haircut could you need, Jay?
Oh, is that an age joke?
No, but you know what? It works both ways, doesn't it?
Did I just step on that one?
It's a you have less hair than me joke. That's all I meant.
I have more hair than a lot of my friends. I can tell you that.
That's true. So I guess you're probably like, what's that guy that we talked about that one time?
120 episodes. I have no idea.
No, that Casanova, not Casanova, although he had a great head of hair. The guy with the blonde hair with the long
Fabio. Fucking Fabio.
Maybe to your friends and family, Jay, you're the Fabio, but
hey, my wife calls me Fabio.
Oh, is that what you get her to call you, huh?
Yeah, I do. I say you better call me this.
And what does she demand you call her? That's the question now.
Oh, I don't. Kitten? I don't know.
Kitten?
I have no idea.
Kitten.
This is a PG-13 show.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Really
we have the explicit rating on every time you download it.
Oh, geez. I have a little bit of news. Speaking of coming out of quarantine, I am no longer on furlough. As of Monday, we're recording this on Saturday.
So you're actually fired now.
There was a moment last week that
solid moment.
Almost 80 people got the email.
Oh, really?
And I wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't one of them. Thank God. So August 3rd, Jay is no longer a bum.
Right. No more excuses.
No more excuses,
as they say.
That's my news. Oscar, any news in your front?
No, other than the simple fact of no one can see me, of course, but that I'm recording this in my new office with my new desk
that you put together yourself.
Yes, I assembled it myself. I didn't cut down the tree and painted it in the proper colors and shapes, but I did assemble it myself. and it was fun and stuff. Yeah, my brother helped me out, and my brother and my friend Luke, friend of the show, and then I got them pizza and stuff for the trouble.
Yeah,
and we had a movie night for it too.
it's a very nice looking office.
Yes, thank you.
It looks really cool. And you mentioned Luke. I do want to. I guess that was my segue here, real quick. Luke is our new $5 a month patron. So thank you to Luke for supporting the show. We love you, man. So that was a good segue there. I was going to mention it later, but since you said his name.
And both Luke and my brother Ralph, who were on the watch party we had last Saturday,
the Antrim watch party, yeah,
right, regarding Antrim, the deadliest film ever made. They said, because they watch a lot of like watch parties. Basically, they watch a lot of people play games, mainly games, but they've seen a lot of them, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you guys are pretty good, pretty on top of everything, and funny." He made my brother did make fun of you that you couldn't find your chat box screen, but other than that, pretty good endorsement.
Awesome, good. Well, tell him thank you. I was very happy with that watch party. Little technical difficulties on my end aside, we had more viewers than our first watch party, so it's growing. Jeremy, thank you, brother, for joining that watch party. Zona ZJ, we love you. So we will do it again in the future. There's a few things we want to work out. We're still thinking about another movie, and stay tuned for info on that. Right.
Right. Yeah, we're not in a hurry for those. We're just kind of going as we go.
Yeah.
On the watch party stuff. It's just a new thing we're trying out. For new stuff though, nothing much more. It's been pretty much work, and when I were in this, I guess both bad and not bad situation with Lexi, where like she works on days that I don't, and vice versa.
Oh,
so like I'm the one who stuck driving her anyway, but because she doesn't have a car or a license, but so I've been home a little more alone, and I've never actually had the apartment to myself until very recently.
Do you like it?
I do. It feels it's a different feeling.
I like it when I'm alone, for sure.
It's a different feeling, Jay, and it's actually kind of overwhelming.
Really?
Because
how so?
Not overwhelming, like not a bad anxious. It's a good anxious. It's where like I'm looking over at the kitchen, right? I'm sitting on my couch, right? Looking at the kitchen. I'm like, okay, first of all, I can have the AC blasting in here because Lexi won't be cold and I don't have to worry about that. But I look at the kitchen. I'm like, oh my God, I can make like 10 different things right now. And then I can gauge that versus how much dishes I would have to do, right? And do it accordingly. I don't have to like make a whole thing for her and for me that we both like, or mix match different things. So I'm like, okay, that's one kind of freedom I like. Now I'm looking at the TV like, holy shit, I can watch the horror movie if I want to watch it. I can, or whatever. I just like the freedom. I can have the computer over here. I can have my feet over there. I can jerk off in that corner. I'm kidding.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just it's like a different feeling in general, and it's kind of freeing.
I feel much the same way when Katie takes the kids. Say they'll go visit my in-laws or whatever. I usually stay home, and
right.
I have all these grand plans I'm going to do. I'm gonna take out the Corvette. I'm gonna pour me a bunch of old fashions, and I'm gonna go sit out in the deck and read a book or work on a podcast and all this stuff, and then I just wind up sleeping.
Yeah,
it's literally what I do. I'll sleep.
Yeah, no, I won't sleep, but I'll veg out at a movie or something. That's what I'll do. Even when I have loftier ideas, like, oh, I should probably finish that story. I should probably start doing the short film, but here in the apartment, start setting up places and stuff. But no, I never do that either. I end up doing the equivalent of sleeping for me, which is watching a movie or playing a game.
Yeah, it's pretty funny the way it works out that way.
Yep. Although on another lighter successful note. Yeah. Later, thank you. I finished a game that I put in like 100 hours in.
100 hours into a game?
I think so. I'd have to double check, but I know it's up there, maybe 80, 90 hours.
What game?
Oh, Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Zelda Breath of the Wild. Man, they're still making Zelda games?
They are, Jay. They are. They really are. And it's my first Zelda game I ever played. I know people are like, what the fuck? But it is my first one.
So you never played it on Nintendo? Nothing.
No. I know they were huge. I know everyone was playing it. I knew about it. But I always played different games. Metal Gear, Resident Evil. Before that, obviously, with the Game Boy stuff, I played Pokemon and stuff. But never Never Zelda. No, no
Wow.
Link stuff. Yeah, no.
The last time I played Zelda was on a Nintendo when I was probably 13. That's the last time I played it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, that tracks were similar in the same age brackets, right? So that's about the same for me as far as Nintendo for me in my childhood. But no, I never played that. Always played different games, F-Zero, stuff like that. But never Zelda. But I finally finished it, and I really gave it its due. Obviously, I could have passed the game after like a couple hours. But I did everything in it. Like I went for every single minutia detail, all the side quests, all the shrines. People who played the game know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I see.
I defeated every single different kind of Lionel, Hinox, everything. So before I beat the final bad guy, so like I did everything.
So after spending 100 hours on this thing, this game, was it worth it at the end?
Right. Yeah, Jay. So I don't play a game like it's my job. I know it feels that way, and it does feel that way sometimes. But I played this game that long because that's how much I loved it. It's a really fun game. Wow. A very beautiful game. Really interesting story. I love the clips in the story when you unlock a clip or like a memory. Really interesting writing stuff overall. I mean, not all the dialogues are great. I skip all the side quests dialogue, really. I just tell me where you want me to go. But all the main stuff is great. Loved it. Great graphics. There's like constant sunsets and sunrises that are beautiful in that game.
It's awesome.
Yeah, very fun.
Over here, it's nothing but Minecraft. Minecraft, fucking Minecraft.
So, do you know how to play the game, or is this just?
It's funny because this afternoon, Katie and Tally were out at a store, wearing masks, of course. Don't send hate mail. And Nico asked me, he's like, "Daddy, can I teach you how to play Minecraft?" I'm like, "Sure." And I'm always buying him these different worlds that he wants, and
like expansions.
Yeah, expansions, exactly. Okay. Whether it's space, whether it's horror themed or underwater themed, if he sees it, I'll typically buy it for him. It's a couple bucks, no big deal.
Right.
So I'm like, all right, show me how it works. So he gives me a remote, and he puts me into this world where all he does is just kill me. I take a step out, and he kills me.
So there's two screens. It's like split screen?
Yeah, split screen.
Okay, so you're both in this world together, two different avatars, and then he finds you and he kills you.
Instantly. And he thinks it's the funniest thing. I'm getting mad. I'm like, I thought you were going to teach me how to play that. I thought we were going to have a bonding moment here, right? These fleeting moments as he gets older. And I would just take a single step and he would bring down like this bolt of lightning and just kill me. And he thought it was hilarious. I hate that game. I think that game sucks, but he loves it.
I can imagine you getting hit by a bolt of lightning, your avatar in the game, and then you going, and a lone tear comes down from your eye, and then
pretty much the tear came about after the 50th time he pulled down that bolt of lightning.
I can imagine Cat's Cradle in the background of your sound echo in your mind. Cat's in the cradle in this, like this is the moment, and you're not getting what you want.
Did not get what I want. No. But I'm a Mortal Kombat guy. I'm an Injustice guy.
Oh, you like fighting games?
I do. This Minecraft thing.
Does it not heat you up though? Playing fighting games?
No. Oh no.
No, huh?
No, real life heats me up. The stupid thing.
Real life and Minecraft, of course. So because Jay, I bought the latest Mortal Kombat because my friend showed me and I played with him at his house and it was on mega sale because I bought it like a year or two after it came out.
Yeah.
So like I got it. And Lexi also really likes those kind of games. So she got it too. We played a little bit. Not as much, granted, but we played a little bit. But other than that game, I really do a good job of avoiding those games because I am so vindictive. I get so angry, Jay, when I don't have my way in a fighting game. When I can't win, especially if I can't win in a row.
Yeah.
Because I'm obviously horribly bad at it. I used to be okay. I'm at my best day. On my best day, I was pretty much a solid fighter. Not like an amazing, but a solid one. I used to play arcade mainly, like X-Men on the arcades at a movie theater. That was my arena, right?
Sure.
But that's how long ago I used to play. But yeah, I would break remotes. I would break Nintendo controllers and stuff when we were younger because everyone in my family, my brothers too, but me more so. And I just had to just cut that shit out of my life.
Cut it out of my life.
Cut it out.
It was bringing me down.
It was bringing me down. Exactly. It was bringing me down. It wasn't doing it like the best. If I would win 10 in a row, I would feel satisfied, but I wouldn't feel happy.
Yeah.
And at the worst, I would get super angry and break things. So like, there's no gain for me.
No, you were smart. You got it out of your life.
Right. So, and that being said, though, I would love to play with you. Like just joking. I can do it in a fun little way, like 1 or 2 fights, not like all day or anything.
Right.
And, but yeah, I would like to see you play those games.
It's cool now because you could get Freddy Krueger. You could get the Alien, right, from the Alien movies.
That's right.
RoboCop, Terminator.
Did you get Mortal Kombat 11?
I think that's the one I haven't. Now, granted, I haven't played it in a very long time. But,
right.
There could be a new one out, and I'm not sure.
Because I think the 11 has that the Terminator one. I think and a Joker and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
Joker, yeah.
Like with Injustice, it's where the DC characters fight each other. That's so much fun because you could play as the Joker and as Batman, Superman, and all these. It's fantastic.
You know what I'm thinking though right now? I'm thinking maybe I should gift you my old PlayStation Portable. It's a handheld. It's like the Switch, but for PlayStation, right? It's an older model for sure, but it works fine. It works 100%, and you can hack it too. But on there, I have Injustice. I think the first one. And you could just,
that would be
if you're on the road or something, you could just have fun with it too, if you want. I don't use it. I mean, I have it there, and I always think I'm going to use it, or I'm always thinking I'm going to put something on. I mean, you can put movies on. If you pirate something, you can put something on there. You can buy it too. You can do a lot more. But I never used it anymore. It's been a long time since I used it a lot.
I would gladly accept.
Yeah, I would just give it to you. Anyway, just a thought I had. So, but yeah, so that's all I got. And I don't know, do you have any more on you hate Minecraft? Okay.
I don't.
With a passion.
Otherwise, it's been kind of a low vibe week. Just one of those weeks, did a lot of research on tonight's episode. So hopefully listeners like it. But yeah,
Shocker.
I guess. A lot of late nights this week on this one, but hopefully people like it.
All right. I'm sure they will.
Should we get into contact info? Yeah. Yes. So, Facebook is at Chicago Ghost Podcast on Facebook.
Chicago Ghost.
And I wanted to start out with Facebook because we got a great Facebook message. I'm not going to say the person's last name because it was a private message, not out in public. So his name is Lee, and I want to say hello to Lee. Lee's from Ireland. We have listeners in Ireland.
So it's Lee with Leigh?
No, Lee.
Oh, okay. My bad.
It's okay.
That's what I get for assuming.
Lee said, quote, "Hi, guys. Hope you're all doing well during this hard time. Just like to say how much of a great show you guys have. I've been listening for a while now, and I have to say my favorite episode is the Funland/Skinwalker Ranch. Thanks, Lee from Ireland."
Nice.
And Lee also suggested that we look into a place in Ireland called the Luftuff's Hall. It's a place where it's said the devil himself once walked. So I asked...
Or herself.
There you go.
My bad. Being inclusive.
Yeah. So I asked Lee, I said, you know what? If you get us a couple more stories or cool legends from Ireland, we'll make an episode out of it. And we'll do an Irish-themed episode. I thought that would be kind of
fun, we'll dress up in green, too.
I don't know if we can say... I don't know if we can say that.
Oh, why not?
Don't know if we could say... I'm not...
I mean, if it's St. Patrick's Day, everyone does it, right? It's like that.
I don't know if that's PC.
I don't know. I mean, I have a Mac, so...
Lee, let us know.
I don't know.
What do you know? You have a Mac.
Yeah.
Let us know, Lee. But yeah, thank you for the awesome comment. The easiest way to get a hold of the Supernatural Occurrence Studies podcast is by visiting our website, chicagoghostpodcast.com. From chicagoghostpodcast.com, you get to all of our social sites, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and of course, Patreon. Now, in case you don't know, Supernatural Occurrence Studies podcast is on Patreon. We have some great patrons so far. For just $5 a month, for only $5 a month, you could get access to Patreon-only podcast episodes. Those are episodes, sometimes it's video, that no one else is going to hear on the main feed. It's just for you. It's our way of saying thank you. Thank you for believing in us and supporting the show. Right. So if you head to the website, chicagoghostpodcast.com, click on the follow link, then click on Patreon. It'll take you right to us. Or just click on the Patreon link in this episode show notes. And again, it'll take you right to us.
Yeah,
What
but
do you
we
say?
thank you. We thank you by showing our ugly faces.
Oh, right. We do
That's
video
basically
casts as well. I didn't
basically
mention
why.
that.
This is how we thank you. We just show our ugly mugs.
That's right. Our I call them our made for radio faces.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have other levels of Patreon support as well. So go over there, check it out, support your favorite podcast. What do you say? We also have a phone number, 872-529-0767. That's Chicago area code, 872-529-0767.
Yeah, I don't. This is suspect. This is.
Why is this suspect? I don't understand.
You're so fucking corrupt, Jay. You know this?
I'm from Chicago. What do you expect?
Holy shit! You running for mayor because you don't have to give them a number. It's like when you call in for a speeding ticket. You want to contest. They give you the worst timing for it. You have to call between these specific hours for this kind of thing, and come to court between this 1/2 hour at a weekday. You can't get out for work. It's like that. This is what this phone number is. Bureaucratic red tape bullshit, Jay. I don't know why you give listeners, customers, but I mean, they're not paying for anything, but the customers, we're giving them a phone number to complain when they could just fucking Facebook us, the other one.
Yeah, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Yeah.
Right. Yarly and, MySpace.
I love that you said our phone number is bureaucratic red tape bullshit. That was fantastic.
You like that?
I do.
Why? I wonder why. What does that work?
If they feel like if they're risky and they want to call that number, leave us a message.
Yeah, that's the first minute is only $1.99, but then it's $3.99 after that first minute. Right, and we'll talk in a sultry voice. But it's funny how Jay found that amusing when I said bureaucratic red tape bullshit, because it's funny to him because it's true, and because it's so true, he finds that funny. The truth is funny.
I'm really surprised, since we are in Chicago, you didn't say what democratic red tape. Wait, what did you call it? I already forgot.
I'm just saying things out of my head.
Something before red tape bullshit. Whatever. I'm surprised you didn't throw democratic in there too. Anywho, let's take a break, come back, and get into this fucking horrible topic.
Yeah.
Bureaucratic, that was the word. So our phone number is democratic, bureaucratic, red tape bullshit.
Autocratic. Let's put all the cratics in there. Automatic, autocratic, bureaucratic.
That's what it was. Okay. Anyway, the lights, they're turned down low. The ceremonial candle is lit. And the drinks are flowing. Let's start this episode. So tonight, in case you didn't know by the title of this episode, Born to Raise Hell, is about a murderer, a mass murderer called Richard Speck.
Oh, mass, not serial?
Right, and I'll get into that.
All
exactly.
Right.
Yes. And for us here in Chicago, Richard Speck was a really big deal. But what I found interesting, when I was talking to people, I have certain groups that I'll bounce podcast ideas off of and get their take. Is it worth doing or not? Whatever. There's people I shoot the shit with about this show. When I mentioned I wanted to do Richard Speck, they're like, who's that? And they weren't from Chicago. A couple of them weren't even from Illinois. They had no idea who this guy was. But for us here, it was massive back in the day. This happened in the late 60s.
So you were around, see? Because
right. Which really surprised me, because to me this was a no-brainer. I knew I had to tackle this guy at some point. But apparently he's not as well known as I thought he was. Now, Oscar, do you know who Richard Speck is?
No.
Or was, I should say.
No.
Really?
I've lived in Chicago. I still live in Chicago all my life. I mean, all over Chicago, and just on the north side. But still, I've never heard of him.
Oh, yeah, he was a real.
It's like that ghost that we went to the cemetery for. Remember?
Resurrection Mary?
Yeah, you were like, oh yeah, Resurrection Mary, let's do one. And everyone's like, all knew exactly what you were talking about. I'm like, who the fuck is that? Who the fuck is this Mary bitch? And then you had to explain to me. I'm kidding. But you had to explain to me, like, oh, you never heard of it? You all were incredulous that I didn't know.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was like, yeah, no, I've never heard of it. And because, I guess we grew up differently, obviously. And just never heard that ghost story. Never heard the serial killer story or mass murderer, sorry.
Correct. Yes.
Richard Speck. I mean, the only one I really knew was the guy from Gacy, right?
Yeah.
That's the only one that, but that's, I mean, I almost want to say he's a level 2 higher in famous because he's world famous, right? Not just Chicago famous.
Right.
Gacy anyway. But yeah, no, I don't know. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And that Gacy is a great point because Gacy started killing in 1972. So Speck, this was 1966. So just a few years later, Gacy happened. Gacy started happening and I think ultimately overshadowed Richard Speck and what took place in 1966 here in Chicago on the South Side.
Maybe that's what did it.
Yeah, and then he was
killed
just kind of killed the fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's still, what I consider a heavy hitter, and I don't mean that in a good way, obviously, but I still think he's up there based on what he did because it's just atrocious what he did.
Yeah, everything you're gonna say on this episode is gonna be new to me.
Okay, good.
This guy, unless you say something that reminds me of some artistic media or film or something that kind of touches on it, that kind of like homages real life, something. Other than that, I can't imagine reminding me of anything. But heavy hitter, that term, it's only one good heavy hitter connotation, and that's for baseball, right? There's no other good heavy hitter. Heavy hitter assassin, that's not a good thing. Heavy hitter murderer, like we talked about, that's not a good thing.
A boxer, Tyson was a heavy hitter, right?
Is that how they would call a boxer a heavy hitter?
I'm pretty sure.
Tyson type? I'm
sure I heard that before.
You then, okay.
Yeah.
Because heavy hitter just sounds like everything you would do as a heavy hitter would be bad, right? Except for sports.
In this case, sports. Definitely.
Right.
Definitely.
Not a good term. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's just, so the Speck murders, they were the first random mass murder of the 20th century, according to ABC News here in Chicago. And like I said, surprisingly, a lot of people are unaware of what happened right here on July 13th into the 14th of 1966, the night of the Speck murders. Now, notice how I said Speck was a mass murderer, not a serial killer. According to the FBI, a mass murderer is a person who, in a single incident, kills 4 or more people in a single location with no cooling off period in between.
Mm-hmm.
This type of killer's victims are usually chosen at random, but victims can be targeted specifically for reasons that make sense to the killer. Whereas a serial killer, on the other hand, kills at least 2 people in separate events at different times with a cooling off period in between those killings.
Right. I think the cooling off period particularly must be the big contributing factor.
It really is. Yeah. It is. And, perfect example, we already mentioned him, was John Wayne Gacy, who killed 33 young men and boys from 1972 to 1978. So that high body count and a wide span of time breaking up that body count, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, Speck, definitely not a serial killer, as he's often mislabeled. Speck came out of nowhere, drenched a small townhome on the south side of Chicago in blood, and then was caught. Now, of course, I left some photos of Richard Speck in the show notes in case you want to see what this monster looks like. And I actually, Oscar, have a news clip about the Speck murders. Is it cool if we insert that clip here?
You don't have a news clip. I have it.
You do.
Okay, let's play it.
When Chicagoans awoke that hot July morning, they received the horrible news that Richard Speck had killed 8 nurses in this apartment, taking them one by one from the bedroom, tying them with bed sheets, either strangling or stabbing them all. Only one nurse survived, Corazon Amaral. She hid under a bed and survived the entire ordeal. Later, to crawl out on this ledge and scream to the neighborhood, "They're all dead. All of my friends are dead. I'm the only one who's alive."
So, Richard Benjamin Speck was born in Kirkwood, Illinois on December 6, 1941.
3 names.
The 3 names, right.
Sorry.
The day before all hell broke loose, as the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Maybe that should have been a sign for things to come for Richard Speck, an omen. Now, so you know, Kirkwood, Illinois is a town I've never even heard of before I started researching Richard Speck, and I'm from Illinois. And as of the 2010 census, Kirkwood's population was just 714 people. So Speck is from this small-ass town. Not that it has anything to do with his murders or his crimes, but still, the more you know. Now, Richard Speck was the 7th child of Benjamin Franklin Speck, I love it, and Mary Margaret Carbaugh Speck.
Wow, a bunch of third names. Also, like, damn, they didn't have anything good on TV, huh?
I guess not, no. Now, Benjamin Speck, the father, was a hard worker, and he was employed as a packer at Western Stoneware in Monmouth, Illinois. And he kept other odd jobs to help pay the bills, like being a farmhand, a logger, and a roofer. Now, Richard Speck was very close to his father, and he particularly loved going bluegill fishing with him, as this was really the only time Speck could have with his father, all to himself, with 6 other siblings vying for their father's attention and all. Now, unfortunately, Benjamin Speck died in 1947 from a heart attack at the early age of 53. Richard Speck was only 6 years old at the time, and sadly, his father's death would really seal Richard Speck's fate. Now, Richard Speck's mother, Mary, was described as a housewife, very religious, and a teetotaler, a person who was completely against the consumption of alcohol. She sounds like a wild woman, right?
Right, yeah. Who totals teas?
I don't know, but just to use that term, teetotaler, that's such an old-fashioned term.
It is.
But that's how newspapers described her. Now, following the death of her husband, Mary Speck was destitute, and she was in financial hardship. And she acted pretty indifferent towards her son, Richard, almost cruel towards him. Now, on May 10th, 1950, Mary Speck married a traveling insurance salesman from Texas named Carl August Rudolph Lindbergh, who was also a raging drunk.
Oh.
The hard-drinking Lindbergh had a 25-year criminal record that included charges of forgery and several arrests for drunk driving, the complete opposite of Speck's sober, hard-working father, Benjamin. 8 months after getting married, Speck's new stepfather moved the family from Illinois to Dallas, Texas. Richard Speck, 9 years old at the time, hated the fact that his mother remarried, and he hated the move to Dallas. So young Speck did the only thing a 9-year-old could do to show his displeasure with the situation. He began to... What's that?
Spit?
No. Oh. He began to act out, just kind of being a little prick to his stepfather. Yeah. Speck and his stepfather were getting into fights. Lindbergh would call Speck a gutter rat and told him he couldn't stand the sight of him. Truth was, Lindbergh wanted Speck out of the house. So to push back even more, young Richard Speck would break into his stepdad's liquor cabinet and drink up all his liquor. Then he would split for days. And by the time he was just 15 years old, Richard Speck would be a full-blown alcoholic. 15.
Yeah, you know, man, I know you don't know the answer to this, but I mean, that's kind of what a leap of difference in people like that this lady went through.
It really is. And for someone who was so close to his biological father, that had to be,
you know, not that I'm not really for like ultra religiousness, you know, because this exists in many different forms. Not all of it violent or anything. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying personally, not my forte. But, you know, she must have lost faith along the way between her first husband's death and her second husband's marriage. You know, like you can almost see it, right? Because if she were, I mean, I assume, right? If she were as devout and all that, she wouldn't be marrying this guy who's an alcoholic.
That's right. And, you know, I think being destitute and being in financial hardship, right. Suddenly, a lot of times religion will take a back seat to getting that paycheck.
Oh, you
and
mean
being comfortable again.
It's more like for survivability, you believe?
I think survivability had a lot to do with it, because
A lot to do with it,
apparently
yeah.
this guy Lindbergh, he wasn't rich, but he was doing okay. He was doing good. He could support this very large family that he just inherited.
That's true. I mean, that's 8 people.
Right? So
yeah. And Speck, that already, I know that he did some fucking heinous shit.
Yes.
But that story you hear a lot of times.
Yeah, and we're not trying to paint sympathy for Richard Speck, right?
No,
I was saying a horrible monster,
in life,
right?
In life, you hear it, and those people are not doing that, obviously.
Yes.
But I'm saying in life, I see our first stories are people completely being complete alcoholics at 13, 14, 15. Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
I hear that. I'm not saying with the same exact reasons, but almost always because of something in the upbringing, some sort of acting out that's happening in result to something bad happening in the house.
Yeah, and so, just imagine being this, and I'm more painting a picture of sympathy for the young child before the murderous monster.
Right. And if you want to get scientific on this, you could even argue that the child version of Speck and the adult version of Speck that does the heinous shit that we're going to be talking about are 2 completely different people, because the cells are all different. So
they're
not the same person.
Completely. So just imagine he's got this very loving, hardworking father. He's going fishing with them, just good memories. He's happy to be around his father when he can. All of a sudden, the father's gone, and this drunken asshole steps into the picture. That's got to be just so hard to deal with. So that's why I said that the death of his father kind of really sealed his fate and would send him down the path of destruction.
Yes.
Now, as I said, he was a full-blown alcoholic by the time he was 15, and being drunk nearly every single day made going to high school tough, of course. So Speck dropped out, and he began hanging out with an older, tougher group of kids who introduced him to things like marijuana and pills and kind of schooled them in the basics of crime. It's around this time that Speck began carrying a switchblade knife, one of his trademark items, and he learned to use it to pick window locks and break-ins and things.
And fight the sharks.
Yeah, right. The Jets.
The Jets, yeah.
Now, between the ages of 12 and 15, Speck would be arrested dozens of times for misdemeanors like trespassing and drunk and disorderly. It's also around this time that Richard Speck learned about sex. He would have one-night stands with the older girls in his group of friends and with prostitutes as well. And soon, Speck began developing this strong dislike for women that he felt were easy or were less than, right? By age 19, Richard Speck's misdemeanor crimes graduated things like forgery and burglary, break-ins, stuff like that.
Any assault stuff? No, not yet.
Minor altercations, drunk and disorderly, things like that. It's also around this time that Speck got his infamous Born to Raise Hell tattoo on his forearm, what I named this episode after. A rather predictive tattoo, considering what this guy would become.
Appropriate title, Jay.
Thank you. He also got the words love and hate tattooed across his knuckles. What a cliche piece of shit.
I wonder, because you see that a lot in movies and TV shows, and I'm positive I've seen love and hate.
Oh, all the time. Absolutely.
No, wait. Oh, my God. I just thought of it now. Keep talking. I'm going to look something up.
Okay. So, yeah, just totally cliche with the Born to Raise Hell and love and hate tattooed across his knuckles. Speck isn't even 20 years old at this point. But by the time he was 20, Speck had a long police record and had already done time. And his slicked back, dirty blonde hair, deeply pockmarked face from horrible acne, and his shitty tattoos made him appear menacing and dangerous. And Speck loved that air about himself. And not only did he look scary, Speck was also described as being very cunning, having the ability to put people at ease and talk himself out of situations, especially legal situations, by turning up that good old Southern charm.
Holy shit, Jay. I got something.
What do you got?
Do you want to keep going and finish your thought first? I'm sorry. And then I can say it?
Sure. Yeah, I'll continue a little bit.
Okay.
And when that good old Southern charm wouldn't get him out of trouble, and when Speck was thrown in jail, his mother would come and bail him out each and every time. Oh. So soon, Speck's resentment towards his mother for remarrying, relocating, and acting cruel towards him as a child, it started to turn to admiration, and he began to view his mother as saintly. And Speck would go forward comparing every woman he encountered to his mother, an impossible an unfair ideal to hold someone to. Now, go ahead, Oscar. What was your point?
So there's this kind of a famous movie, an old movie that this reminded me of, the thing you told me, The Love and Hate.
Okay.
You said that was tattooed on his hands, like on his knuckles?
On his knuckles, yeah.
Oh my God, this is insane. Let me read a description for you, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
This very famous movie. Now, it's famous, I think it was famous at the time, but by now it's not as famous, just an old movie now, but it's still revered quite highly by critics and people in the movie industry. I'm going to read the short description of this movie and then describe stuff I'm going to say about it. A religious fanatic marries a gullible widow whose young children are reluctant to tell him where their real daddy hid the $10,000 he'd stolen in a robbery. Now, that in itself, maybe it has some echoes to the story we're telling, but not really overall. It's a movie called Night of the Hunter, and it's about a guy, Charles Mitchum stars. It's about this guy who is this religious fanatic guy who quotes the Bible all the time. His knuckles have the tattoos of love and the other one hate. And he has a whole speech, actually, that relates to it in order to charm the locals, so to speak, that he's a preacher. And he describes why he has them both and the fight between love and hate and all this stuff. But he's a maniac. He kills people almost indiscriminately. He doesn't care. He just wants the money.
Wow.
And he marries into this family of 2 kids with this widow who is very religious as well. Not like ultra, but, religious. And the children are, act out against them. And it's very similar, is my point. It feels very similar.
There's some echoes there for sure.
There's some echoes, right? And this guy is religious and fanatic, and he's a serial killer, essentially. And he goes from town to town evading authorities as well as evading his sins along the way, so to speak. Huh. And it is so similar. And I was checking the year it came out, and it came out 10 years before. So 1955.
Oh, okay.
This movie came out, and I thought that interesting. I wonder if Richard Speck got the idea from this movie.
Oh, it very well could be.
Yes.
I mean, who would, now it's like I said, it's a cliche thing to get love and hate on your knuckles. Get the fuck out of here.
Right.
But back then, I mean, how common was that? Probably not very at all.
No.
So maybe it did come from the movie. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that might be the first time you see it in cinema that way. The knuckle tattoo stuff, then you see that, think of there's Seinfeld episode that makes fun of it, right? Jerry, hello, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
Right. or the Hold Fast from Bosch from the series that's on right now on Prime Video, things like that. But man, I just thought when you said Love and Him, like, I know that sounds familiar.
Interesting.
So I don't know if that's a connection to real life. Maybe he took it from the movie.
It's possible. That's very interesting. I didn't see any of that in my research, but it could make sense.
Right. When did he get to tattoo? Do you know when roughly, or just know when he got it?
No, it was around that, like 16 to 19 year age.
So he was like 6, 7 years old when the movie came out.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. The father died when he was 6. So Who knows?
For its time, it's a brutal movie, actually.
At first, I thought you were going to say Mindhunter.
No, Night of the Hunter.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because in the Netflix show Mindhunter, they do interview a fictitious Richard Speck.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, they do. And something very dramatic happens. And I write it into the script later towards the end.
Oh, okay.
But that's where I thought you were headed.
Oh, no, not at all.
So back to some more history on Speck. In October 1961, Richard Speck, now 21 years old, met 15 or 16-year-old Shirley Malone at a Texas state fair. Okay. Now, reports differ all across the board about her age. It's either 15 or 16. It's one of those two. She was young. Okay.
Yeah.
3 weeks later, after they met at the state fair, Shirley was already pregnant, and the two quickly married.
Oh, okay. Now, works fast.
Very fast. Now, to try and support his new family, Speck took a job as a truck driver for the 7-Up bottling company. But instead of bringing his check home to provide for the new family, Speck would instead blow all his earnings on hookers and booze. But there was a double standard in place here. Speck demanded that his wife live by a much higher standard than he did. Psychiatrists would later say that Richard Speck suffered from what's called the Madonna prostitute complex.
I would have said the Hippocratic Oath, but yeah, that's not a word.
Which basically says that women are either virginal and pure, or they're sluts, whores, and prostitutes. There's no in between.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, Speck saw his wife as part of the second category because he believed that she was being unfaithful, even though there was absolutely no proof to back up his claim. In Speck's twisted mind, his young, pregnant wife was no good. She was tainted. So Speck doubled down on the cheating and on the drinking. He even refused to pay for any of his wife's medical bills with the pregnancy. And he was in jail for disturbing the peace when his daughter, Robbie Lynn, was born on July 5th, 1962. So there is a daughter out there. Cannot find a single bit of information about Robbie Lynn Speck, just so you know. I tried.
Do you think that's on purpose, or is that due for her lack of footprint to the world? Like she worked somewhere, did something nicely and quietly? And
I think she wants her anonymity.
Well, yeah. I mean, if this guy is as famous as you saying he was at that time, then right, it probably was on purpose.
Yeah, I'm sure she's had a name changed. You know.
Yeah, maybe married someone, took that name, kind of thing.
Definitely not in Texas anymore. I would assume she probably relocated.
Maybe
couldn't find anything about her. I tried.
Okay.
Now, in July of 1963, Speck was sentenced to 3 years in prison for theft and check fraud. And when he got out after serving just 16 months, he was even more dangerous. He was still married to his wife, Shirley, but this time around, Speck was violent with his wife, and he started demanding sex from her up to 5 or 6 times a day. And if she refused his demands for sex, Speck would slap her around and choke her and rape her at knife point. Seeming to enjoy being a sleazy criminal, Speck began to make comments around the bars that one day he would do something that would make headlines. In January 1965, Speck attacked a woman with a 17-inch carving knife in a Dallas parking lot. Now, thankfully, the woman got away and Speck was arrested, but he claimed he couldn't remember anything about the attack because he had blacked out from drinking too much. Speck was allowed to plead guilty to aggravated assault instead of attempted rape or attempted murder because he did claim not responsible because he was drunk. Right. And he wound up only doing 5 months' time for this massive knife attack. This time when he got out of prison, his wife Shirley finally smartened up and divorced his terrible ass in January 1966. About 2 months after the divorce, Speck got into more trouble when he robbed a grocery store. A warrant was issued for his arrest, but instead of facing the music on the warrant, which would have certainly held more prison time, Speck split Texas and headed back to Illinois, thinking he could recapture some of the good times and fond memories he had growing up there with his father.
Yeah, you can even work it out in your head, kind of.
Right. I'm going to get a fresh start, right? But the demons Speck was running from had already taken hold and were growing rapidly. And moving back to Monmouth, Illinois, a town about 10 miles from his boyhood home in Kirkwood, Illinois, would not grant him any reprieve. Speck reunited with his brother and his sisters. And even though they were made aware of their brother's legal issues in Texas, they tried to help him out. They found housing for him with family friends. Speck's brother, William, managed to get him a carpenter job. And at first, it seemed like Speck was turning his life around. But those demons, their claws are sharp, and their poisonous whispers can be ambrosia to someone like Richard Speck. All it took to send Speck spiraling again was news that his ex-wife Shirley had remarried back in Texas. Upon hearing the news, Speck quit his job, moved into a shitty hotel, and started drowning himself in liquor and pills. He felt betrayed by his ex-wife, and he was angry. In order to alleviate his feelings of betrayal and anger at the hands of a woman, on the night of April 2nd, 1966, Speck broke into the home of a 65-year-old woman named Virgil Harris in Monmouth. Brandishing an 8-inch knife, he blindfolded the helpless woman, raped her, then cut up her nightgown so he could use strips of it to bind her. He then disappeared into the night. Miss Harris described her attacker to police, and because Monmouth was such a small town Illinois place, Speck was quickly identified as the perpetrator. And once again, he skipped town to avoid capture, just like back in Texas. This time, Speck ran to Chicago, about 3.5 hours away from Monmouth, where his sister Martha lived with her husband, Gene Thornton. Speck showed up on their doorstep and told his sister and brother-in-law that he had to leave Monmouth because the local mafia was trying to force him to sell drugs for them. I would love to see the Monmouth Mafia, just saying.
Me too. It's like Fargo, right?
Right. Now, his sister and brother-in-law didn't necessarily believe Speck's crazy story, but the brother-in-law found Speck a job as a merchant seaman, and a deckhand was his role. On April 30th, 1966, Richard Speck set sail from Chicago's Calumet Harbor on a boat heading to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. But a few days into the trip, Speck suffered a severe bout of appendicitis, and he had to be airlifted to St. Joseph Hospital in Michigan, where a doctor said that if it had taken Speck an hour longer to get there, he would have likely died. Oh, if only.
Right.
Now, Speck's appendix was removed, and as he laid in the hospital for a few weeks recovering, he developed an affinity for the young nurses tending to him. Foreshadowing. When he was healed, Speck went back to work on the boat that he was stationed on. But once again, he began to drink and pop pills. He would get drunk and pick fights. He fell off the goddamn boat a few times. He would expose his cock and balls to his shipmates. And when he finally pulled a knife on a superior officer, the camel's back broke, and Speck was kicked out of the Merchant Marines. Now jobless and homeless, Speck decided to look up a nurse he befriended at St. Joseph's Hospital named Judy Lacanimi. I love that last name. Lacanimi. And the two actually struck up a relationship. And by all the accounts I've read, the relationship was solid. No bullshit from Speck, but it was brief, only lasting a few weeks. Judy would later say that Richard Speck was a perfect gentleman, that he showered her with gifts and dinners at expensive restaurants, and that when they parted ways, it was on good terms. Pretty unbelievable. Now, from there, Speck returned to his sister's house in Chicago, and he slept on her couch for a few weeks until his sister told him to shove off and get his broke ass back on another boat, which he did. He found more work as a seaman. But when Speck arrived at the Maritime Union Hall in Chicago on July 13, 1966, to start his new job, he was told his position was given to another deckhand, someone with more seniority. Now, this slight infuriated Speck, and he called his sister and begged for help, and she wound up giving him some money. Now, with a little money in his pocket, Speck rented a room at a grungy hotel in Chicago, on the South Side, called the Shipyard Inn, and he went off and started drinking. And by now we know anger and alcohol don't mix well at all with Richard Speck. Around 6 o'clock in the evening on July 13th, again, 1966, Speck forced a woman he met in a bar named Ella Mae Hooper up to his room at the Shipyard Inn at knife point, where he raped her and stole a .22 caliber gun the woman had in her purse. Just after 10 p.m. that night, Speck wound up drunk at a place called Luella Park, near East 100th Street and South Luella Avenue on Chicago's South Side. It was a perfect 70 degrees in Chicago that night. Next to Luella Park was a townhouse building used as a senior student nurses dormitory by South Chicago Community Hospital, what was then a 291-bed facility and one of Chicago's oldest hospitals, built in 1895. It's now part of Evangelical Health System, and it's called Advocate Trinity, still there. Now, drunk and angry, Speck watched nurses coming and going from the building. It was finals time, and the townhouse building was full of senior nurses cramming for their tests. One thing Richard Speck made note of was that there were no men to be seen. The building was full of unprotected young nurses, and Speck and his demons were a fugitive, alone, angry, drunk, homeless, jobless, and penniless. I wonder if the Born to Raise Hell tattoo on his forearm began to itch or throb as Speck sat in Luella Park concocting his profoundly evil plan. And dressed in black and carrying Ella Mae's stolen gun and a knife, Speck headed over to his chosen townhouse, one where 8 student nurses lived and where one was just spending the night. The townhome was small and nothing fancy. It was 2 floors. Upstairs, there was a bathroom and 3 bedrooms filled with bunk beds and single beds, and none of the bedrooms had telephones. Downstairs, there was a living room, a powder room, and a kitchen where, presumably, the only telephone was located. At around 11 p.m., Speck entered the townhome through a back window, walked up the stairs, and found a bedroom, and he knocked lightly 4 times on that door. A 23-year-old Filipina nursing exchange student named Corazon Amareo answered the knocks at the bedroom door. When Corazon opened the bedroom door, Speck was standing there, gun in hand and ready to raise some hell. Speck told Corazon that he was there to rob them, and as long as no one acted up, no one would get hurt. And to this day, it's really anyone's guess whether or not robbery was Speck's prime motive for entering the townhome that night, or if it was murder all along. Speck could have used the robbery line to keep the women calm as he steeled himself for what he really intended to do. Either way, from approximately 11 p.m. on Wednesday, July 13th, 1966, until about 3:30 a.m. on Thursday, July 14th, Richard Speck systematically destroyed 8 student nurses in that townhome, either by stabbing them with his trusty knife or by strangling them with his bare hands. Some were both stabbed and strangled, and one was even raped. It's reported that initially, Speck told Corazon that he was only there to rob them because he needed money to get to New Orleans, and that if everyone complied, no one would get hurt. He said he was only going to tie them up. Speck then herded Corazon and 2 other exchange students into the next bedroom, where 3 other American students slept. Speck woke the Americans up, and then apparently he sat down and talked with the 6 women for a while, smoked cigarettes as he told them his story about needing money to get to New Orleans. He tried to crack jokes, and he told them to relax, that no one was going to get hurt. He was even calm at this point. And don't kid yourself, this isn't Speck trying to be a good guy because he felt bad about the robbery. This is classic Speck using his cunning and fake Southern charm to try and placate his victims before the big reveal. At some point during this calm period, Speck took a bedsheet and sliced it into long strips. And then, one by one, Speck led the women out of the bedroom where he was keeping them, used the bedsheet strips to tie their hands behind their backs, and viciously killed them, thoroughly washing his hands in between each killing. Now, before we get into each victim, I want to quickly mention that the events surrounding the Speck murders is one of the most enduring mysteries in Chicago crime. Why didn't any of the women try to escape the townhome? It's believed that Speck spent about a half hour alone with each victim, plenty of time for the remaining women to band together and try to make an escape. Why didn't they try to fight or overpower Speck? Of course, I've never been in a situation like this, thank God, but I would think that 6 women could have done some damage to this goofy, gangly fuck. Why didn't anyone in the other townhouses hear anything that was taking place? 8 women being systematically slaughtered had to have made some noise, yet no one heard a thing. We'll never know the answers to these questions, but it's interesting to think about. What we do know is who was murdered and how. Now be sure and check the show notes. I have a link to a photo of all 8 nurses killed that night, so you can follow along as I go through each one. So murdered that night were 20-year-old Pamela Lee Wilkening. Pamela was described as a shy, serious, studious, decisive, and quiet person. Always someone who's always slightly removed from the action. And people thought she would make an excellent military nurse. At a younger age, Pamela was a Girl Scout, and she belonged to her high school's nursing club. Now, it's believed that Pamela was Speck's first victim that night, and she showed him her contempt by spitting in his face and telling him he'll never get away with this, and that she'll pick him out of a lineup. If Speck was really there to only rob the women, this was likely the event that triggered his rage. Speck gagged and then stabbed Pamela through the heart. The slaughter had begun, and there couldn't be any witnesses left to identify him. So he moved on. Another victim was 24-year-old Nina Jo Schmally. Nina was described as a good student and an excellent caregiver. She was well-liked and quiet, but with a sense of humor. Nina loved Elvis, cats, and the color pink, and she drove a beautiful 1957 Chevy Bel Air convertible, a gift from her father. And I would love to have that car. And she was set to be married after graduating nursing school. Remember, they're in finals. So she right around the corner was a marriage for this poor woman. Speck stabbed and strangled Nina to death. There was 20-year-old Patricia Ann Matusik. Patricia found her calling to be a nurse after watching her younger cousin Tommy die slowly in the hospital. After school, when Patricia was 14, she'd go to the hospital and visit her cousin, talk with him, fluff his pillows, hold his hand, tell him she loved him. Friends and family described Patricia as sweet, assertive, funny, and full of life, and she loved water ballet. Speck strangled Patricia to death with a piece of bedsheet, and Patricia was buried wearing her nurse's cap and uniform. There was 20-year-old Mary Ann Jordan. Mary was inspired to become a nurse by stories about her grandmother, Grace Jordan, a high-ranking surgical nurse at the University of Michigan. That, and Mary had a younger brother born with Down syndrome, who she was very close to, which made her want to specialize in pediatric nursing. Mary loved to swim, ice skate, and play softball, and it said she had a wicked Irish sense of humor. And that's a quote from her sister. Now here's a crazy twist. Mary used to live at the townhouse where the murders took place, but she had moved out and was living back home on the night of the murders. But Mary's brother, Phil, was dating a woman who still lived at the townhome, a woman named Suzanne Ferris. On the night of the 13th, Suzanne Ferris was with Mary's brother, Phil, and the two of them wound up back at Mary's house, the family house, where Suzanne convinced Mary to spend the night back at the townhouse on the south side of Chicago so they could talk about wedding plans, because Suzanne and Phil were planning to get married. So shortly after 12:15 a.m. on July 14th, Mary Ann Jordan and Suzanne Ferris arrived at the townhouse, walked upstairs towards Suzanne's bedroom, and both were killed. Mary was stabbed 3 times in the chest and once in the neck. And of course, there was 21-year-old Suzanne Bridget Ferris. Family members described Susan Ferris as a natural caregiver. They also described her as pretty, perky, kind, and popular. She paid her own college tuition, and according to her brother, Suzanne did very well in situations that you're not necessarily in control of, which would have made her a perfect nurse. And of course, Suzanne was engaged to Mary Ann Jordan's brother, Phil Jordan, as I already mentioned. Speck stabbed Ferris to death as she walked up the bedroom, the stairs towards her bedroom. She was found with a nurse's stocking wrapped around her neck, along with 18 stab wounds to her chest and neck. There was 24-year-old Valentina Pazian. Valentina was an exchange student from Manila, Philippines. Apparently, there was a shortage of nurses in the U.S. at the time, and a wave of Filipina nurses helped settle that need. Valentina was part of that wave. Prior to coming to Chicago, Tina, as her parents called her, graduated among the top 10 nursing students at Manila Central University. Here in the States, working at South Chicago Community Hospital gave Tina the ability to send money back home to her family so they could live better lives, which she did regularly. Tina spent most of her time in the townhome studying and writing letters to her family back home, and she was known as a good cook among her housemates. Speck slashed Valentina's throat down to the larynx and left her face down under a blue cover. Speck also killed 23-year-old Marlita Gargulo. Marlita was another Filipina exchange student nurse, just like her housemate, Valentina Pazian and Corazon Amareo. Marlita was the first person in her family to ever visit the United States. Actually, when Marlita flew from the Philippines to Chicago, Corazon Amareo was on the same flight, but the two didn't know each other yet. Newspaper reports described Marlita as quiet, shy, hardworking, efficient, pretty, and blessed with a rich singing voice. And while she lived in the townhouse, Marlita would sing while she did dishes and the laundry. Growing up in Manila, Marlita helped raise 8 younger siblings, so she was well adapted at caring for people. She would have made a great nurse. And just like Valentina Pazian, Marlita sent much of the money she earned working at the hospital back home to support her family. Marlita was found stabbed and strangled, and her body was carelessly tossed on top of Valentina's body. Guy's an animal. And finally, there was 22-year-old Gloria Jean Davy. Gloria was the second of 6 siblings and was born in the same hospital she would later study at, South Chicago Community Hospital, and she was raised not far from the townhome in which she would eventually die. Gloria's sister, Lori, described her as driven, independent, intelligent, headstrong, poised, creative, and snippy. Gloria wouldn't hesitate to call you out on your bullshit if she didn't like something you were doing. Gloria graduated from a college I went to, Northern Illinois University, go Huskies, and in 1965, she became head of the Student Nurses Association of Illinois. On the night she was murdered, 3 of Gloria's younger siblings were at the family home, excited that the very next day, July 14th, their older sister would be done with nursing school and would move back home for good. Shortly after 11 p.m. on July 13th, Gloria called home to let her family know that she was back home and safe in her townhome, like she always did when she went out. She had been out for the night, on a date, I believe. Richard Speck was already upstairs when she made that call back home. And shortly after Gloria hung up that phone, Speck raped and strangled her to death. And Gloria was the only one to suffer the indignity of being raped by Speck that night. So those are the 8 unfortunate souls that were fallen by Richard Speck's hands. But there were 9 women in the townhouse that night. Remember Corazon Amareo, the one who answered the bedroom door when the devil knocked? Corazon, or Cora, as her friends called her, was the only woman to survive the carnage that night, and she would later testify against Richard Speck in court. You see, during the killing spree, Cora was able to sneak away and hide under a bed, and Richard Speck, in a drunken, pilled-up, frenzied murder haze, forgot that there was one more person in the townhome. He was doing so much killing, he actually forgot how many people were in the house.
He lost count.
It's simply unbelievable. Yes, he lost count.
Well, I mean, thank God for, I guess, alcohol in this case, for the addle-mindedness of it.
Right. Yeah, imagine if he would have been clear of mind, right?
Right. Clear of mind and wanted to do this. I mean, I'm not blaming alcohol for his behavior, definitely. But it didn't help. But also made him forget. So
made him forget.
Good for her.
Yes. As Speck removed each woman from the bedroom, he led them out to slaughter. Cora, as he was doing this, Cora sat cowering and terrified, first under one bed, and then she kind of scuttled under another, listening as her housemates, her friends, were ravaged by this lunatic. I can't even imagine what she was going through. Just place yourself in Cora's position and just let it sink in. Cora stayed hidden into the dawn hours till about 6 a.m., well after Richard Speck had left. Not knowing what to do, Cora climbed out a second-story window and onto a ledge facing 100th Street, and she screamed, "They're all dead. My friends are all dead. Oh, God, I'm the only one alive." Cora was rescued, and as I mentioned, she was the star witness at Speck's trial. And we'll get into Speck's trial here in a bit. Anyway, Cora eventually moved back to the Philippines, got a job as a nurse, and was elected to the town council in her hometown of San Luis. She got married to a lawyer named Alberto Atienza, and the couple moved back to the U.S. And for years, Cora worked as a critical care nurse at Georgetown University Hospital in Washington, D.C. Cora is now 77 years old and has 2 children, Abigail and Christian, and 6 grandchildren. And if you check the show notes, I left a then and now photo of Cora, the lone survivor. Actually, the now photo of Cora is from a single interview she did since the murders with Chicago's I-Team, somewhere around the 25th anniversary of the Speck murders. That's the only somewhat current photo I could find. I also left in the show notes a picture of the townhome where the murders took place, which includes the window Cora climbed out of and the ledge she stood on and yelled for help. So listeners, if you're interested, check that out. Okay, so back to Speck. After the murders, Richard Speck went on the run. Kind of. This isn't a mastermind we're dealing with here. Speck didn't run far, choosing instead to get drunk in shitty hotels and bars not too far from the crime scene. About a mile away, actually.
Really?
Yes.
Yikes.
Now, because Cora Amareo was such a great witness, she was able to give a near-perfect description of Speck. A sketch artist quickly drew up a composite based on Cora's description, and detectives hit the streets with copies of the sketch. Workers at a nearby gas station recognized the man in the sketch and remembered that some guy had come into the station complaining about a job he lost on a ship. With this information, the detectives went to the Maritime Union Hall where Speck had received his seaman's card, and showed the sketch to an agent in charge at the Union Hall. Not only did the agent remember Speck, but he was able to pull out of a crumpled piece of paper out of a wastebasket that, sure enough, had Speck's name on it. Now, the detectives knew who the killer was based on this agent in charge. Now it was just a matter of finding him. Meanwhile, dumb shit Speck went on a drinking binge, hopping from bar to bar, completely oblivious to the fact that the cops were onto him. Police got a hold of Speck's brother-in-law, Gene Thornton, and Thornton was able to track Speck down at the Shipyard Inn. Thornton told Speck that the Maritime Union Hall had found him another job. In turn, Speck called the Union Hall and spoke to that agent in charge, who was in on the ruse, and Speck agreed to come down to the Union Hall to enlist for the next sailing. But, thinking something was fishy, Speck never showed up for his fake assignment.
Right.
Immediately, Speck hung up that phone, packed his bags, called a cab, and went to a downstairs bar to wait for his ride. Now, while waiting for his cab to arrive, he was shooting pool and, of course, drinking some more. And at one point, 3 Chicago cops walked into the bar looking for Speck. He was standing just 10 feet away from the cops, but they didn't notice him and they left. They could have had him right there. Speck then took a cab, picked up a hooker, and checked into a flop house called The Rally near the Caprini Green housing projects on the south side. This is all happening on the south side, by the way.
Right,
and again,
right.
Speck never went that far from the crime scene. The desk clerk at the Rally immediately noticed that Speck was drunk, and she overheard the hooker he was with call him Richard. About a half hour after checking into the hotel, Speck's lady friend, we'll call her, came running back downstairs and told the clerk that her date had a gun. The clerk called the cops. At around 8 a.m., Richard Speck woke up to 2 police officers standing over him. The police asked his name, and Speck gave him his real name. They checked his wallet. They found his union card with Richard Speck written on it. And when they asked him about the gun, Speck said he claimed it belonged to the hooker, which it didn't. It was Ella Mae's gun, the one he had stolen a few days earlier. The cops confiscated the gun, and then they left, telling the desk clerk on their way out that Speck was harmless. You see, not all the Chicago police were notified about the murders or about Richard Speck being wanted. Information traveled a lot slower in the 60s, I guess. Speck quickly packed his things and he left the Rally. Just 15 minutes after Speck fled the hotel, 2 more cops walked in and showed the desk clerk his picture, his composite. And she said, "It's him. It's Richard. He just left." Speck then made his way to a really shitty hotel called the Star Hotel on West Madison Street. This was a hotel for bums and winos, and its rooms were more cell-like, and all of the rooms smelled like sweat and booze and vomit. It's this kind of place.
Right.
He checked in, threw down his belongings, and then, of course, went out and did a lot more drinking. Upon returning to the Star, Speck smashed a liquor bottle and used the glass to cut his wrists and inner elbows in an attempt to commit suicide. Bleeding badly, he called out for help and some water. Now, someone in the hotel made an anonymous phone call, and an ambulance came and took Speck to Cook County Hospital. It was there, as Speck was still laying on the gurney the ambulance brought him in, that a first-year resident nurse named Leroy Smith recognized the Born to Raise Hell tattoo on Speck's forearm. When Speck asked Leroy Smith for some water, Smith grabbed Speck by the back of the neck and he said, "Did you give those nurses some water?" And that was it. Speck was caught. Yeah. It was July 17th, 1966. Speck had been on the lam for about 3 days before he was caught. And he was 24-year-old at the time of his arrest. Now, Richard Speck's trial began on April 3rd, 1967, and it was held in Peoria, Illinois, as his attorneys thought their client wouldn't get a fair trial in Chicago, and they were probably right. As we talked about, Corazon Amareo was the star witness, and her retelling of the carnage she and her housemates experienced at the hands of Richard Speck absolutely captivated the courtroom. At one point during the trial, it's reported that Cora stepped down off the witness stand and walked right up to Richard Speck. And even though she was absolutely terrified of him, she pointed her finger 2 inches from his forehead and said, "This is the man." Just a badass. Now, of course, Speck's attorneys argued that he was insane and incompetent, but the judge wasn't having any of that nonsense. Overall, it took the jury just 49 minutes to come back with a guilty verdict, and Richard Speck was sentenced to death by the electric chair on April 15, 1967. Unfortunately, though, the United States overturned its stance on the death penalty in 72, and Speck was instead resentenced to 8 consecutive terms of 50 to 100 years. It's like 1,200 years in jail.
Yeah.
And you might say, well, 8 consecutive terms of 5 to 100 years in prison is worse than one jolt and you're dead in the electric chair. And I would answer, in Richard Speck's case specifically, death by the electric chair would have been better, especially for the victims' families. And you'll see why here in a bit. Now, Richard Speck died of a heart attack on December 5th, 1991, just one day short of his 50th birthday, at Silver Cross Hospital in New Lenox, Illinois, about 20 minutes from Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill, Illinois, where he had been held for nearly 24 years. No one came forward to claim Richard's body, so he was cremated, and his ashes were disposed of at an undisclosed location somewhere in Joliet, Illinois. And that should have been the end of Richard Speck, but it wasn't. In May of 1996, Bill Curtis, a WBBM investigative journalist here in Chicago, received a videotape from an anonymous attorney taken at Stateville Correctional Center, a supposed maximum security prison, in 1988. Clips from this strange video ran for 6 nights during WBBM's 10 o'clock newscast and apparently boosted ratings 69% compared to the previous week. The video in question showed flagrant abuses of prison rules by prisoners who were seen on tape doing drugs, having oral and anal sex with each other, and passing illicit money around. One of the star prisoners on that video was none other than Richard Speck. The Speck portion of the video was recorded in an area of the prison and on equipment normally reserved for staff training. And how Speck and his cohorts even accessed the area is unknown. Totally unacceptable for a maximum security prison. Now, I remember seeing clips from this video on the news back in 96, and I remember thinking to myself, what the fuck? The video shows Speck parading around in women's panties. It shows him sniffing something off another prisoner's bare leg while laughing and talking shit. And most shocking of all, it shows Richard Speck bare-chested with very large female breasts. You see, Speck was trying to transform himself into a woman by taking smuggled-in hormone treatments. It's a disgusting thing to watch. This is a guy who was supposed to be suffering in prison for life for killing 8 women. But instead, the video shows him having the time of his life. And he says as much. One of his quotes is, "I'm having the time of my life behind bars." At another point in the video, Speck says, and this is a quote, "If they only knew how much fun I was having in here, they would turn me loose." Portions of the video not shown on TV show Speck blowing another prisoner and doing massive amounts of cocaine. In the video, Speck admits to his murders and laughs when describing them. And he said that he doesn't feel bad about having committed them, and he describes what it's like to strangle a person to death. This videotaped admission by Speck is incredibly compelling because for the first time since trial, he openly breaks his testimony that he could not remember anything about the murders because he was in a drug and alcohol-induced state of amnesia, both during and immediately after his killing spree. This is why I say, especially for the families, a one zap and you're done in the electric chair would have been much, much better. And as far as Speck trying to transform himself into a woman, I kind of glossed over that part. Psychologists think Speck may have developed this plan as a way to survive in prison, as a defense mechanism, making himself appear as a woman, be jail attractive to other prisoners, be everyone's bitch, be used as a sex object, and allow himself to be turned out by stronger prisoners would guarantee his survival. Having the other prisoners prefer to fuck him than kill him. And apparently it worked. And anyway, I left a video link to the Speck shit show in the show notes if you want to watch it. What was shown on TV anyway.
Wow.
Now here's one more story from Speck's prison time for those of you who watched the awesome Netflix series Mindhunter. In Mindhunter, the budding FBI serial killer profilers named Ford and Trench interview a fictional Richard Speck to try and get a better understanding about the man and his crimes. In Mindhunters, as Speck's being interviewed, he takes a little bird he's holding and in a very dramatic scene, whips that bird into a spinning fan, shredding the bird to pieces. It's totally messed up scene and it comes out of nowhere. It really jolts you. Well, of course, that's just a television show, right? As it turns out, that actually happened. In prison, Richard Speck was known as the Birdman because he kept and took care of birds he would catch. One day, a prison guard caught Speck with one of his birds and he threatened to take it away. And at that, Speck tossed the bird into a spinning fan, killing it. After which he said, and this is a quote, "If I can't have it, no one can." Man, if that doesn't give you a peek into this guy's psyche, I don't know what.
Right. That's interesting, that detail from that show that they got from real life.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, before we close this episode, there are a few more points about Richard Speck I'd like to make. First is the question as to whether or not Speck committed other murders that we just don't know about. Well, Speck never admitted to other murders outside of the 8 nurses, but wherever Speck was known to be, especially during his times as a merchant marine, the deckhand, unsolved murders of women also happened. Let's go back to Monmouth, Illinois. If you remember, I mentioned that on April 2nd, 1966, Speck raped and robbed 65-year-old Virgil Harris. Well, on April 13th, 1966, also in Monmouth, Illinois, Mary Kay Pierce, a 32-year-old barmaid at a local tavern called Frank's Place, was found brutally beaten to death in an unused hog barn behind Frank's Place that apparently Speck helped build, and he was known to also visit Frank's Place on occasion. Police briefly questioned Speck about Mary Kay Pierce's death, and they told him to stay in town in case they needed to question him again. When police went back to re-interview Speck for a second time, he had already skipped town.
Yeah, because of the other thing he did.
Exactly.
Wow.
In Indiana, Speck was wanted for questioning in the murder of 3 girls from Illinois who disappeared and whose bodies were never found. Their names were Renee Bruhl, Patricia Blau, and Ann Miller. On Saturday, July 2nd, 1966, the 3 girls vanished from Indiana Dunes State Park after boarding a boat and heading off onto Lake Michigan. Indiana Dunes was incredibly crowded on this particular day. Upwards of 8,600 people were on the beach in preparation for the 4th of July holiday. A number of people saw the girls talking to a man on a boat, then watched as the girls got on the boat and sailed off, leaving all their belongings on a beach towel back on shore. And that was the last time the girls were ever seen. And to this day, no one knows what happened to them. A boat Speck was working on docked in Indiana in June, and it's believed Speck was in the area the day the 3 girls went missing on July 2nd. And after he was caught for murdering the nurses, Indiana police were in fact interested in Speck as a suspect. But apparently he was never questioned. Authorities also wanted to question Speck about 4 other murdered females aged between 7 and 60 that took place in Michigan in 1966. Remember, Speck spent time in Michigan in the hospital, and he dated that nurse that lived in Michigan. So he was known around there. These murders, too, were never solved. Now, sometimes when authorities believe they have their man dead to rights on another crime, like they did with Speck and the 8 nurses, they won't want to muddy the waters by adding additional possible crimes. They figure, well, the guy's caught, he's going away, and he'll never get out. Let's just leave it be. But there is the question there. And if he did commit these murders, that would bring him to the serial killer level, right? Because of the time in between.
Yeah, I mean, right. It'll make him like a serial mass murderer.
Yeah, right. I think, yeah, I guess so. Maybe a hybrid.
A hybrid is really rare, I imagine.
I would imagine as well. I don't know, but I would imagine as well.
I mean, if 1% of the population has these serial killer tendencies, you think of surgeons and trillionaires and stuff, and obviously serial killers. Then 1% of them could potentially be both, like a hybrid.
It's possible.
Sounds really
I have
rare.
to research it. That's an interesting thought.
That might be an interesting avenue to research. I don't know how you research it, but I'm sure psychologically speaking, psychologically speaking, I'm sure you can. There's so much.
Oh yeah.
There's so many journals.
I never thought to look that up.
Yeah.
So, the question whether or not Speck committed other murders. There's also the question of nature versus nurture in regards as to why Richard Speck was the monstrous person he was. Was he born that way, or did something in his upbringing make him the person he was? Now, obviously, we can't answer this question here on the podcast, but I think it's pretty clear that Speck himself thought he was born a monster, as evidenced by his Born to Raise Hell tattoo. After Speck's death, his brain was autopsied, and it was discovered that his brain had some strange abnormalities. For example, one area of his brain, the hippocampus, which involves memory, and another part of his brain, the amygdala, which deals with rage and other strong emotions, physically encroached on each other, like their physical distance from one another was blurred, which is extremely highly unusual. Now, no conclusive reason was given as to why Speck's brain developed this way or what it means, but the abnormality was there nonetheless. And it was determined by scientists that such a highly exceptional abnormality would definitely lead to highly exceptional consequences, i.e. possibly the Speck murders. Here's something else about nature versus nurture. A psychiatrist named Marvin Zipperin diagnosed Richard Speck as having an IQ of a 10-year-old and said that he showed signs of brain damage. Therefore, considering the FBI's connection between crime and the intelligent quotient of the offender, it's likely that Richard Speck's IQ may have affected the choices he made during his criminal career. I don't know. This one's really interesting. It was also brought up during trial, unsuccessfully, mind you, that Speck had no control over his actions because he was programmed to be a killer at the chromosomal level. Speck's attorneys argued that he suffered from a condition called XYY syndrome. Now let's take a brief biology lesson here. In normal, healthy humans, each cell contains 23 pair of chromosomes for a total of 46 chromosomes. 22 of those pairs look the same in both male and females. The 23rd pair, however, of chromosomes, the sex chromosomes, differ between males and females. Females have 2 copies of the X chromosome, so females are XX, and males have one X and one Y chromosome, so males are XY. Anyway, there is an instance in which a male can be born with an extra Y chromosome, again called XYY syndrome, or sometimes it's called the XYY karyotype, or Jacob syndrome, named after the scientist that discovered this chromosomal abnormality. Now, according to the National Institute of Health, XYY syndrome occurs in 1 out of every 1,000 males. Symptoms of XYY syndrome include a specific height range, 5'7" to 6'3", Speck was 6'1", learning disabilities, speech issues, weaker muscle tone, behavioral issues like violence and aggression, and severe acne. As I said, Speck was 6 foot 1 inch. He spoke with a very heavy Southern drawl that some interpreted as a speech impediment, and he had a very low IQ, and he did have terrible acne scars, and he was definitely violent and aggressive. It seems, according to the symptoms of XYY syndrome, that Speck was a perfect candidate for having that extra chromosome, and therefore he couldn't be held responsible for his crimes. And in fact, a lot of news sources have labeled Speck as having this XYY syndrome. The only problem is Speck was tested twice, and both times test results showed that he had the normal male XY chromosomes. Sorry, defense team, your client, Richard Speck, is healthy, relatively speaking, completely competent, and he was likely not born to raise hell, but instead raised to raise hell through a combination of a low IQ, an abusive stepfather, and a horrible drinking problem that set in at a very early age and lasted throughout his life. Case closed. And finally, if you're anything like me, and you're curious about the locations where these infamous crimes took place and how they sit today, yes, the townhouse where the Speck murders took place is still standing, and people live in it. The address is 2319 East 100th Street in Chicago. Now, I left a Google Maps view of the property in the show notes, and it looks exactly the same as it did back on July 13th and 14th, 1966, the night of the Speck murders. So there you have it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny, the nature versus nurture thing, because I think it's both, man. It feels like the more we talk about these, I'm more leaning to like, it depends on the person. Because there are oodles of examples of people coming out to be completely heroic or normal or healthy or wholesome people out of really shitty upbringing, and vice versa. People who come up with insanely normal, wholesome,
Absolutely.
well, stable upbringing become monsters.
Absolutely.
And those are examples of nature maybe winning out in that scenario. And then others are like nurture. Lack of nurture, bad nurturing is the result. I think it's both.
Well,
I don't think it's ever one or the other. I think we think that there has to be one or the other, but I think it's both.
Well, to use your example from earlier, those corporate powerhouses, those billionaires, those leaders of industry, they all have psychopathic tendencies.
Right,
but because they were raised in a certain way, in a loving, caring, supportive, possibly dual parent home, I'm sure I stepped on a landmine on that one too, didn't I? They went a certain way, where someone like Richard Speck, who didn't have any of those things, went completely opposite way, but they both share the same traits.
Right.
So I think nurture is the key. Nurture is the key. That's what it is.
You think 100% nurture is the key?
I do. Because these people are born with the same traits. Whether it's the corporate CEO or whether it's fucking Richard Speck, they have the same traits. But because one came from a supportive home and one was an alcoholic at the time they were 15, getting slapped around by their stepfather.
Well, that's the thing, Jay, is that I think you could find plenty of examples of the other way around too. That's the thing, there's no blueprint. There's no real blueprint about this. I overall believe you. I'm on your side about the nurture is the key. I think it's the bigger factor over nature. I mean,
right,
over nature. The idea is that people, when you think of nature versus nurture in the case of serial killers, people think that if you're talking about nature, that you're talking about being born to be this bad, right?
Yes.
To be hell, to be the devil, to be evil, right? That
right.
They're born this way. No matter what you would have done, it was always going to be this way.
Right.
That's not exact. I know that's how nature is taken, but nature could be a myriad of different things, of chemical imbalances, of elements and artifacts that have nothing to do with the upbringing that are in play, that regardless of their actual upbringing of that person, they were always going to behave this way. Now, how much negatively or positively it's the result of, then you would add in nurture. Right. That's a different thing entirely. But you talk about this guy and his amygdala versus and crashing his hippocampus. Is that what you said? No, what did you say?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, the hippocampus and the amygdala.
Yeah,
hitting all the time. Like that's a rare thing that happened that made everything worse. That made it easier for him to lead down this path.
Yeah, that's what I thought was so.
That's nature.
That right, it is. But what I thought was so interesting about that was it was so rare that scientists, they had no predictable outcome for that condition. All they knew is that because the condition was special, the outcome is going to be special.
Yes. Well, yeah, right. It's like you can't predict that the person's actions, but they're going to be different. That's all you know. It's going to be strange. It's going to be different.
Yeah, right.
You just don't know exactly what, right? It's like when you call someone great, it could be great bad or great good.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
It's going to be great, but we don't know what kind of great. And the nurture thing, overall, I believe that nurture is the guiding post for a lot of these people that, do bad things, and vice versa, for do good things too.
Yeah. Because,
completely.
Nurturing, getting back to that strong familial unit, they're going to recognize that, hey, there's something fucked up with little Billy. Let's get him into a specialist. Let's get him onto the right medication. Let's get him the right therapy.
Yeah.
So he turns out a normal, productive member of society, right?
But even that can't be predicted either, because let's say, how you're curious as a kid, and as boys especially, boys are more like this. I know that because I'm a boy, is that, boys tend to be more violent and physical, right? We look at something and we turn it into a gun to play with. Everything.
Absolutely.
Every object, right? It's instantly violent. I know it looks fucked up actually when you think about it. A kid making anything he grabs into like a weapon to pretend. But you take that and sometimes I come from a good home, loving home, everything upbringing, whatever, XYZ. That person could get one event that lets him to be more curious about something that leads to murder, leads to something horrible, and that person cannot be at fault for anything. I mean, it's a person's fault obviously, but you can't blame one or the other. But this person just chemically something in his head gave him the satisfaction of seeing this poor animal die or something when he was 8, and I don't know, who can say?
Yeah, with Speck having a low IQ, like you said a few minutes ago, that's nature, right? But then did he have a low IQ because his intelligence was stunted because he was an alcoholic at such a young age?
Right. I think about that too, actually. The crazy. Alcoholism is very interesting because it's like it becomes part of his blood, right? It's like, it's almost like, it's like his cigarette, his food, it's like the alcohol is everything for him.
Yes.
It almost does dictate his behavior, and you could almost blame alcohol for it. Obviously, it's not, because if you consume it regularly, just like a weapon, it's like a firearm isn't dangerous unless it's in the wrong hands, or if it's dangerous if it's without loaded, if it's unloaded, right? Things like that. Like an alcohol, it's not alcohol's problem, but it's like used in such a systematically half his life. Right?
More than half
his life, getting drunk all the time. I can't imagine. I don't know how that feels like at all, being drunk all the time. I have no idea.
Well, it becomes a point to where they literally cannot live without it. I've known alcoholics in my life. They cannot live without it.
Oh yeah, me too. But I just don't know how it feels.
Yeah, and they actually die when they get off it. Their body goes into shock because it doesn't have alcohol anymore. It's a horrible, horrible disease.
Yeah. That's why they have all the meetings and stuff for it.
Yep.
It's a strange thing, but alcohol is like the fuel for like this nightmarish actions he does.
Yeah.
Because like he can't. How you feel liquid courage, right? That's alcohol.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You feel that stuff. You know what I'm talking about? The brazenness of it. It turns into a shy person into a dancer in any nightclub kind of thing. It's like you take that to the degree of Richard Speck, and this is the result. The 8 nurses.
Yeah. And then of course, you add the joblessness, having no money, having no place to live,
right?
Having no future. Clearly, no future.
He also acts like a predator. Like a predator. You talk about nature, right? In nature, a predator would seek out the weakest gazelle, right? Running from the pack. You seek out the weakest or the most infirm or the smallest one, the one that's lagging behind, to kill, to be your dinner.
Yeah.
Right. If you're a lion out there in the savannah. And likewise, he acts the same way. He sees an opportunity with this women-only area, this house full of defenseless women. Like the women thing in general could be a point of predator. And obviously in his own personal life, the mix of his mother versus the Madonna thing you mentioned earlier.
The Madonna whore complex.
The combination of a lot of things, of anti-women fare and misunderstanding of the opposite sex, led to really him being such a bad guy in that way to women. But in this case, though, like he sees the weak gazelle, which is this house, this townhome, and he takes advantage. He's like a predator that way.
Absolutely.
Too,
He's a fucked up guy. Jesus. Yeah. Well, I hope you learned something tonight.
No, I mean, yeah, I get. Oh, and I know that I said earlier that I did not, I've never heard of Richard Speck, and it's true. I mean, I've seen the Mindhunter episode because I've seen all 2 seasons, but I didn't like immediately recall anything. And when you start talking about the nurses, I did remember something, and I think I've seen people talk about this in movies or documentaries over the years. I just never put 2 and 2 together that was Richard Speck, and I didn't know it was a Chicago thing either. I didn't know it was that close to home.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know any of that. But it did remind me, specifically, it reminded me of the 90s movie, The Frighteners, which is a Peter Jackson movie starring Michael J. Fox. And in it, it's about this serial killer that comes back from the dead as a ghost to kill more people because he's obsessed with killing the most, being the serial killer that has the highest number.
Right.
That's what his obsession is. And along the way, when they do the crazy flashback of him killing, the first, he killed like 8, 9, 10 people when he was alive. When he's killing them, when he hits the 9th one, he remarks that, "Hey, I just beat Richard Speck by 1."
No kidding.
Yeah, he says that. Like
in the
he
Frighteners.
says,
wow.
Yeah, in the Frighteners. I'm not sure if he says Richard Speck, but I think he does name check him. He says, "Hey, I beat that guy with the nurses by 1 now." And he starts killing more, trying to beat the numbers of all the serial killers he's known about.
Holy shit.
So that reminded me of that. Yeah. But other than that, I guess I knew in like the periphery of my life, I knew Richard Speck, but I never knew him.
Yeah, when my mom asked me tonight, "Oh, what are you guys recording?" I said, "Richard Speck." She's like, "Oh, I remember that clearly. We were terrified, in Chicago." And she remembered it well. And,
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh, God, he was so gross." And look at the pictures in the show notes. He is a very unique looking character with this slick back hair, these deep acne scars, and these kind of like livery, fishy lips. He's a very strange guy. And my mom just kept saying what a creepy guy he was. So that's it. Richard Speck.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, man. That's all I got. I don't got much on this one. This is our like, I don't know how many we've done. Over 10 for sure. Serial killers. Over 10, right?
I don't know. I'd have to go back and count.
Around there. But yeah, it's definitely fascinating human behavior, but I definitely do not have anything else to add.
Okay. Well then, Oscar, please safely bring us home.
Let's do it.
What did you say? That was fantastic. Bureaucratic. Damn it. That's what it was.
We should just come back saying that. Bureaucratic.
I will.
On the last show we did for the AMP, Luke's audio got cut off and we had to restart. Because we do it through an online server now. So because we don't get together anymore to do it.
So kind of like this.
Kind of like this, yeah, but without video. It's a Zencaster. Okay. We use Zencaster. We're just audio only.
Okay.
And it's very easy to use. Really fun. Anyway, and his audio got cut off. And we asked him, we were talking about a review. We're like, so what did you think, Luke? And we're like, Luke, did he die? And we just start talking like, oh shit. And then we get texts and stuff while we're recording. I left all this in there because it's funny. And like, oh shit, he got cut off. And we start making fun of him for getting cut off. And like, where does he live? In some fucking nowhere place? And just saying shit, And then we're like, fine, let's go into spoilers. And then Luke will come back. So that was funny.
Luke, he could have been in Alaska.
No, he's in Chicago.
Oh, is he home?
Yeah, he is home. He's been home.
Polar bear could have eaten his internet cable. I don't know.
Right, because that's what they're known for. I actually don't know how I keep coming up with new ways to make fun of the phone number.
And every time, like, I always forget to say, like, hey, don't forget to say something funny. And I'm always thinking as I'm saying it, like, is he going to remember, or should I make a hand signal or something? But you did.
It's all on the top of my head.
It's good, though, but it's like a thing now. You always make fun of the phone number. That's our shtick.
I'm going to run out of things eventually, Jay. I'm surprised I'll keep going. But I've been surprised for like 20 times now.
You've come up with some gems during that shit, dude. Bureaucratic red tape bullshit. That was good.
Shit. Drop my mic. Whose mic? I'm just charging my vape. Yeah, I'm so surprised I keep coming up with it. I should be like one of those improv guys or something. Yeah, be liked by someone. But you're right. Yeah, I guess you're right in a weird way. The Seinfeld is a big proponent about that. Like he doesn't give two shits.
Good point. Yeah.
Right. He's a big adopter into like, as long as it's funny, I don't care how you act.
Unless you're Michael Richards and you drop the N-bomb in front of everybody. Can't do that.
Oh yeah, is that what he did?
Yeah.
What was that? How did he do that? Do you remember?
He was being heckled at some comedy club. I don't know, 10 years ago, more maybe. Mm-hmm. And he lost his shit, dude, and started calling everyone the N-bomb.
Oh, really? So it wasn't just once?
No. He went on a whole tirade.